Okay, the third week of 6 weeks of worship. A living sacrifice. The word for sacrifice, service of worship, that is used in Romans chapter 12, verse 3, is the word for temple worship. Latruo. It happens about 6 times in the New Testament only. And every time it's referring to the same thing. Service done in the temple. Other than this one. But it's talking about a sacrifice of your life every day. And the idea that I want to try and get across is our lives outside of this meeting are intended to be worshipful, full of worship. Our lives ought to display a desire to declare God's worth and His worthiness, like we talked about in the first installment of this. I think sometimes we get busy. How many of you guys, I'm going to just take a moment, okay, with me, and imagine a day in your own life, okay? What is a day in your life like? Is it calm and serene? Are you like flying through life with kids being drugged behind and all the things you've got to do? What do you think of when you think of your life? Does anybody think of the word calm and peaceful? Anybody? You know what I think? This is kind of interesting to me, but almost every time I ask somebody how are things going, you know what the answer is? Busy. Ask anybody. It doesn't matter who it is. Ask any person, what is your life like? And this is the word they're going to give you. Busy. I'm busy. I'm busy. I've got a lot of things going. I'm doing lots of stuff. I'm a very important person. I'm very busy. How many of you have never heard this? Anybody? Why does this describe life today? It may not be like this in other places. Actually, I know it's not like this in all places because I lived in Kentucky and I watched my neighbors sit on the front porch and do this all day. Just like slowly wave at the people who drove by. Of course, they're retired ladies, so, I'm sure they had busy times in their life before that. Why is this the thing that describes our life today? I don't think busyness is a bad thing. I think it can be, though. I think it can be a very bad thing. I think it'd be a lot worse than a lot of other things that we call sins. Because it takes away the ability to be with God. It takes away the ability to be who God wants me to be because I'm too busy. This isn't to say that we don't have responsibilities in life. And becoming a Christian doesn't remove the responsibilities. It doesn't keep us from having to do the same things. Like you don't become a Christian all of a sudden you don't have to pay your bills anymore. It'd be nice. It's not how it works. Like none of the things change. I become a Christian and all my obligations are still there. All the things that I'm supposed to do are still there, and then God says, I want all of you. So how do I find my life balance in that when God demands everything of me, and so does everybody else? How am I supposed to find, any kind of non-schizophrenic way to live if everything is required of me all the time by everyone? Anybody got an idea? Any thoughts? How do I keep focus on God when everything else is so busy? How do I continue to put the first things first, the most important things first? I think I talked about this maybe a year or more ago, but there's these 4 different categories of things that we call priorities. One, the first least important category is the not urgent, not important. It's ringing a bell. then the urgent, not important, then the not urgent, important, and then the urgent and important. Everybody always takes care of the urgent and important. And the urgent, not important, often demands a lot of our time. But for some reason, the not urgent, important gets left in favor of the not urgent, not important. You know what things fall into the category of not urgent but important? Spiritual everything. It's never urgent, is it? God never demands of you that you pray. He never says, if you don't do it by this day at this time, right now, you're going to die. He never makes it an urgent thing because He wants us to choose it, and urgent things are forced upon you, aren't they? And so when it's never urgent, and I never feel a pressing need for it, I have to actually adjust my life in order to make it fit, in order to be part of who I am. And this is what I kind of want to talk about in the realm of Romans chapter 12 and verse 1, where he says, I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. How are we supposed to keep God in focus when everything else is pulling at us all the time? One of my favorite people of all time, Coach John Wooden, used to say this all the time. Be quick, but never hurry. Now, what's the difference between being quick and hurrying? Because on the surface, it seems like the same thing. How many of you have ever been in a hurry? What happens when you're in a hurry? You forget things. You mess everything up. Everything just gets worse, doesn't it? It's amazing. But the more you hurry, the less you accomplish, the more ineffective you become. Isn't that funny? There's a totally different mindset between quick and hurrying. If I'm hurried, I'm not actually in control, am I? Something else is in control. Maybe it's the task to be done. Maybe it's a schedule. Maybe it's something else. The undercurrent of this idea is this desire, this intent on a purpose that's greater than accomplishing just the thing. And this, I think, applies into every area of life. So whether you're digging a ditch to plant a water line in the ground, whether you're, tamping a shot into an espresso cup thingy, filter pod, is that what it's called? Whatever they call that thing. Portafilter. I was close. Cup, filter pod. Whether you're changing a tire, whether you're, whatever it is you're doing, the undercurrent is that this task is not the most important thing ever. Now, why might this be a helpful or important mindset to carry? Because everything we do in this life, all the things that we're forced to do are just going to die. They're going to be pointless in a very short amount of time. You ever cooked dinner? Anybody ever cooked dinner? Did you have to do it again? It's like this entire life we live is just a series of things that must be done again. If the whole point is just doing the things that must be done again, our life is nothing but a wheel like a hamster spins. And it's pointless. But there's something underneath that gives meaning and purpose to all of it. It makes the most menial tasks, the most, ordinary things become something that God considers worship. And this is where our mindset really matters, doesn't it? How do you offer your body as a living sacrifice instead of a dying sacrifice? You remember what Peter said? Jesus, I will die for you. Remember that? And then what did he immediately do? He ran away. He didn't die for him. He lied, pretended he didn't know Jesus. Maybe Jesus didn't want him to die for him anyway. I think it's a lot easier. The idea of dying for something is easy. You know why? Because it just happens one time and it's over. Why is it harder to live for something than it is to die for something? Why is it harder to get up every day and say, this is my purpose? This is what's important. This is what matters. This is what I'm about. This is who I am. This is what I value. This is who I worship. Why is it harder to do that than it is to say, you know what, if a Taliban person threatened to cut off my head, if I didn't denounce Jesus, I'd let him cut off my head. Like, well, that's quick and easy. Jesus says, I want you to live your whole life as a sacrifice. When you get to choose, see, because the person doesn't really get to choose, do they? You get to choose every day. You get to choose how you live. You get to choose what's important to you. You get to choose whether or not you're accomplishing the thing that's really important, or whether the thing that's really important is what's underneath. I think the wording is intentional. Read with me again, Romans chapter 12 and verse 1. He says, I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God. Why do you think he says the mercies of God? You ever thought about that? By the mercies of God, offer your bodies a living sacrifice. You know, what is it that mercy does? It withholds punishment. It holds back the thing you deserve. You know what you actually deserve? You deserve to be a dying sacrifice. That's what we have all deserved. That's what our death, our sin has earned for us is death. And that's what I deserve. He says, I want you to pay attention to something here. By the mercy of God, you get to offer yourself a sacrifice that doesn't have to die like Jesus did. You get to choose a life of service to God, of kingdom service, like temple service in the Old Testament, but it's living, because temple service meant dying and bleeding and burning. As a living sacrifice, acceptable to God, this is your service of worship. Don't be conformed any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by renewing of your mind, so that you can test and approve what the will of God is, which is good, acceptable, and perfect. Life is never just about accomplishing a thing. Especially for the Christian, it's not about just doing things. It's not about attaining status. It's not about getting stuff. It's not about completing tasks. Our life is supposed to be a continual service of worship. Or what happened here? We got the roly thing again. Or a worship of service. If you flip the words around, we're worshiping God by the way we serve with our lives. This is what God desires. This is what we're designed to do. This is why we still have jobs. This is why we still have responsibilities. This is why there's still things for us to do in this life that look very similar to the things we used to do before we became Christians. Because I'm now using the service that I do in this life for God and not for you. It's not for God and not for me. It's now for someone else. My life now belongs to Him. And as a result of that, I get to choose to serve. And that choice is counted as worship. God sees it as me saying to Him, You are worthy of my life. You are worthy of my service. You are worthy of my effort. You know what the regular way of looking at it is? I'm worthy. I'm good enough. I deserve this. I should have it. I'm working for me. And I think that's supported by all the, contemporary speech of the day and the self-help books and everything. That you should take care of you and do for you what you want. But when I become a Christian, when I choose God, what am I choosing? I'm choosing to say my life is now a service to you. Turn to Colossians chapter 3. Colossians chapter 3 and verse 22. Slaves of all things. Slaves, he says. Slaves, in all things obey those who are your masters on earth, not with external service as those who merely please men, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, do your work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance. It is the Lord Christ whom you serve. He does not say, slaves, you should rebel against your masters, and slavery is unjust and shouldn't happen. What does he say? Whatever you do, even if you're a slave, your work as a slave that is compulsory, that you don't get to choose, can still be worship to God. Why? Because you're doing your work for God and not for the slave driver. Anybody ever have a slave driver of a boss? Those bad bosses that's a jerk, and you're like, I don't like this person. They're terrible. You're not working for that person if you're a Christian. Like you don't have a choice now. Like you have to do that work, whatever that work is, for God. This is kind of challenging for people like me who, claimed to be Christians and weren't, and acted like jerks when they worked for jerk bosses. So I wasn't seeing anything I was doing as if I was doing it for God. It was like, well, this guy's a jerk, and therefore he gets this much effort. As little as possible. Whatever you do. What does whatever cover? Whatever you do. Does that cover the way you return your shopping cart at Walmart and not leave it next to the car? I think so. I mean, does it cover the way that you speak to regular people that you meet when you're not having a good day? I think so. And whatever it is that I do, everything in my life, every piece of me is supposed to be a reflection of worship to God. All those things that may seem insignificant are now significant. Because every bit of it says to God, you are worthy. You are worthy of my life. All the things that I do, you're worthy of them. If I could do this all for you, I would do this all for you. So I'm doing it as if I'm doing it for you, even though it might benefit someone else. How do you go through a day that's miserable and filled with things that you don't want to have to deal with? With worship. This is like what we talked about last time. The idea of enduring trials and sufferings by worshiping, by looking to God and trusting that God is finding an answer, that He's working things out in His way in His time. And this, whether you're, this guy digging this lovely ditch, this can be worship. Or it can be the opposite of worship. You can dig a ditch and curse God, can't you? But you could also dig one and praise Him. That our life is intended to reflect Him. Our life is supposed to be worship, all of it, not just a little portion, not just the singing, praying portion, but everything, all of it. It changes how I live. When I'm not just hurrying through life, but when I'm intentionally, what am I saying? When I'm intentionally choosing to worship God in whatever I'm doing, whether it's work or play or, just regular errands or whatever it is. That's the question today. So are you just hurrying through life? Or are you worshiping in your life? Like with the people that you work with the people that you interact with in your daily life, assume that you're doing anything for God by the way that you do what you do? Or they think that you don't even know God? I heard this story about these two guys in Kentucky. This is a true story, bizarre. They worked at a factory. I think it was the styrofoam cup manufacturer that's over there. Whoever makes styrofoam cups. Dole? Is it Dole? Do they make styrofoam cups? I don't know. Whoever's making styrofoam cups in South Central Kentucky. These two guys worked on the same shift, ate lunch together for like 12 years. And then one of them accidentally slipped and said he was talking to someone at church. And the guy's like, "Oh, I didn't know you went to church." And he's like, "Yeah, I go to this such and such Church of Christ." And he's like, "No way, I go to that such and such Church of Christ." Neither one of them knew that the other person was even a Christian. And I don't think that's atypical. I think that's pretty normal. Of people that they segregate their lives. Their life isn't worship. They're not striving to serve God in their job outside of, Christianity in the regular secular realm. They're trying to just live a life and be a normal person. But God wants more. He wants all of your life. He wants you to be worshiping Him and declaring with your life that He's worthy no matter what you're doing. And doesn't mean I have to become a nun or a monk and go live in a monastery somewhere. It means that I do what I do, whatever that is that I'm doing, as if I'm doing it directly for Him. And that's what makes the difference. We're going to take a break, and we'll have our discussion.